Tonight on The ReidOut.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings.
Liz Cheney drops a bombshell in the closing moments of today's January 6th hearing, alerting the DOJ to a fresh round of possible witness tampering by Donald Trump. Plus,
what it was going to be was an armed revolution. I mean, people died that day. Law enforcement officers died this day. There was a gallows set up in front of the Capitol. This could have been the spark that started a new civil war.
Gripping testimony about the Oath Keepers and its indicted leader, Stewart Rhodes, from a man who was once on the inside. That witness, Jason Von Tattnove, joins me tonight. But we begin tonight with Trump summoning the mob. From the very outset of these public hearings, a memorable line from Liz Cheney laid out exactly what happened. President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Today's hearing spelled out exactly how the mob was summoned that day, which, as with most things Donald Trump, can be traced back to a tweet. In this case, on December 19, 2020. As the committee showed, it's important to note what happened in the frantic final weeks of the Trump administration leading up to that tweet. Today's hearing filled in those blanks, focusing on everything that happened after December 14th, the critical date when the electors meet and the election is finally over. In fact, here's what Mitch McConnell said the very next morning.
Yesterday, electors met in all 50 states. So as of this morning, our country has officially a president-elect and a vice president-elect. Many millions of us had hoped the presidential election would yield a different result. But our system of government has processes to determine who will be sworn in on January the 20th. The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden.
So did the former president follow the advice of his advisors? Because they were certainly sending a unified message.
If your question is, did I believe he should concede the election at a point in time? Yes, I did.
I conveyed to him that I thought that it was time for him to acknowledge that President Biden had prevailed in the election.
I believed at that point that the means for him to pursue litigation was probably closed.
And you recall what his response, if any, was?
He disagreed.
What Trump did instead was to assemble a gathering of his inner circle 4 days later, on December 18th. A mix of the usual motley crew of personal lawyers pushing fraud and a collection of White House and other lawyers telling Trump that what his band of misfits was pushing to do was nuts, including this claim from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone.
To have the federal government seize voting machines, that's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States. There's no legal authority to do that. And there is a way to contest elections, that happens all the time. But the idea that the federal government could come in and seize election machines, I don't understand why we even have to tell you why that's a bad idea.
In the meeting, the former president watched up close as Cipollone and other lawyers batted down the increasingly ridiculous claims and legal arguments from people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. The latter he actually considered naming as a special counsel to investigate voter fraud.
I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice. And so I didn't understand how they had gotten in.
I was asking, you claim the Democrats were working with Hugo Chavez, Venezuelans, and whomever else.
Yeah, I remember the three of them were really sort of forcefully attacking me verbally.
I think that it got to the point where the screaming was completely out there.
I'm going to categorically describe it as, you guys are not tough enough. Or maybe I put it another way, you're a bunch of
It was a meeting White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson later described as unhinged. So, of course, Trump doesn't listen to the rational lawyers or the fringe lawyers. Instead, he turned to a new plan, riling up his supporters with that 1:42 a.m. tweet on December 19th. Quote, big protest on D.C. on January 6th. Be there. It will be wild. He knows the rest of it is a lie. But what happened after that explosive invitation was that the planning and marketing of the rally for January 6th completely changed, as did the effort to sell the big event and his wording of his planned speech that day. And today we heard the inevitable conclusion, predictable in hindsight, from one of the many individuals who went into January 6th, believing that he was following his leader, the former president, Stephen Ayers, an Ohio man who has pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct for his actions that day.
During this review, we identified you entering the Capitol as we see in this video. Mr. Ayers, why did you decide to come to Washington on January 6th?
I was, pretty hardcore into the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I followed, President Trump, on all of the websites.
So why'd you decide to march to the Capitol?
Well, basically, the president, got everybody riled up.
Joining me now, Frank Figliuzzi, former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence and MSNBC National Security Analyst, and Matthew Dowd, political strategist and founder of Country Over Party. Thank you both for being here. Frank, I thought this was another dynamic hearing. But what it boils down to, in my mind thus far, is that Trump had three options for staying president. Option number one, go the legal route that a lot of candidates do who lose elections. You do lawsuits, you try to win. He lost all of those by December 14th. Option two, try to get the Department of Justice to play ball, to pretend that there was something wrong with the election so he could convince state legislatures to throw out their own electors willingly. That's option two. Option three feels like what we learned about today, which is get the fake electors, just get pretend ones. Get those electors somehow to Washington, give them to Mike Pence, and then use violence to make him certify them. What did you make of the hearing today? Because just to throw one thing in there, before option three, in my reading of it, Donald Trump's goons assembled, right? Like a bad Marvel movie. Kelly Meggs, who was the leader of the Oath Keepers, she put a Facebook message on December 19th saying this week I organized an alliance between Oath Keepers, Florida 3%ers, and Proud Boys. We have decided to work together and shut this S down. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can claim anymore that there was a spontaneous riot that developed out of a peaceful rally on January 6th. We're done with that misperception. But you're on the money here, Joy, with regard to those three options. And what happened today was we were taken behind the scenes, as close as we may ever get, really, to kind of the thinking of Donald Trump. Because by behind the scenes, I mean we understand the chronology that got him to that option number three, which is I got to appeal to the masses now because I've got nothing left here. And, I can't take credit for this great description of that meeting in the White House with people just waltzing in and people asking, who are you? Pat Cipollone is sitting there with other official people. And here comes this ne'er-do-well cast that was described by Neil Katyal earlier today as the bar scene from Star Wars with, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. And you won't see a more stark contrast between the rule of law and the rule of Trump. By the rule of Trump, I mean, if you can't get what you want, just get there by any means necessary. And so we saw then that next step is the tweet, that says, be there, it's going to be wild, right? And we also heard that White House call logs show two calls on January 5th with Steve Bannon. And what does Steve Bannon do after call number one with the president? He gets on the air and he says, all hell's going to break loose tomorrow. So about as close as we're going to get to a smoking gun, not the smoking gun showing direct knowledge, but when you combine it with the Secret Service telling him, don't march down to the Capitol, and he still wants to, and he wants that march to the Capitol, that rally cry to be kept secret just among a few people, because he says, I don't want to get in trouble with the National Park Service, right? I'm not buying that. So where I come from, where I'm at with this now, is there's clearly enough predication for DOJ to have opened a case, if they have not, that includes Donald J. Trump's name in the subject line of the case. Do we have a successful indictment, prosecution, and conviction? I'm not there yet, but we've got a solid predication to open a case on the former president.
Right, and Matthew, I mean, what Trump has in common with, people like Stewart Rhodes, in addition to their sort of penchant for violence or interest in violence, is the sense of entitlement that it doesn't matter what the election said. It doesn't matter if we couldn't prove that there was any fraud. That doesn't matter. Trump is going to be president no matter what.